the next, 14 weeks. And just in case, everybody's here for History 2. Nobody's here for trigonometry or anything like that. This is a math-free zone. You don't have to worry about that. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the class and a little bit about myself. Good morning. History 2?
Yeah.
All righty, you're in the right place. Your grade in here, and that's usually what students are most interested in at first. Your grade in here will be based on 2 exams. You're having a midterm and a final, and 4 quizzes. You're going to be graded on a 200-point scale. And by the way, everything you'll need to know is in the syllabus, which is in the Blackboard site for the class. So, I'm not printing them off. I don't want to kill that many trees off anymore. But please read the syllabus. All of the dates, all of the rules, everything you need to know about the class is in here. Or damn near everything you need to know is in here. Okay? So you want to look at this when you get a good chance. But anyway, you're going to be graded on a 200-point scale. Your midterm and your final will be both worth 50 points each. And each quiz is worth 25 points. So 180 to 200 would be an A, 160 to 179 would be a B. There's also an extra credit readiness quiz. And it's optional and it is extra credit. I don't use the weighted total on Blackboard, so it'll show up in the weighted total, but ignore that, okay? It's the 200-point scale. But if you want to try and earn 20 extra points, try the readiness exam. It'll give you an idea of what we're going to cover this semester and give you an idea of what you're going to need to study. And it'll also give you an idea of what the quizzes are going to be like. Let's see. Even though this is a lecture class, I do post the lectures online, all right? So if you miss one, you can always catch an older edition, so to speak, online of the same lecture. Having said that, though, since this is a regular lecture class, I will take attendance. And I'm not going to do it today, the first day, but I'll start by passing around a sign-up sheet every morning, probably starting with you over there in the end. You get 3 free unexcused absences. All right? In fact, I don't even want to know why you're not here. It's one of those. I've got too many weird excuses in the past. But anyway, after that, unless you're really sick or have a family emergency or something, and I know some of you folks are in the military, and every once in a while they call you up, things like that. So if you have a legitimate excuse, let me know, all right? If not, for every day you miss after 3, I deduct 2 points off your score. So be here, all right? You miss all the fun if you're not here, right? Now, one of the nice things about a face-to-face class like this is you guys can ask questions, there's give and take, people can express their opinions. And I want to make it clear early on, you're going to be graded over the material, not how well you agree with me on anything. All right? So feel free to speak up in here. If you don't, I'll probably provoke you, or try like hell anyway. I like a lively class. But at any rate, I try and keep my own political opinions and other things out of here. But keep in mind, you're not going to be graded on anything like that. If you, on the exams, can prove your point, marshal the evidence, make your case, you'll get a good grade, all right? So I want everybody to understand that you're getting graded on the material. And by the way, speaking of that, on the exams, the only thing you're allowed to use on the exams is the class material. No Googling anything. I run it through SafeAssign, and it'll pull up if you're using an outside source, all right? Trust me, there's a lot of garbage out there. You just Google something, you never know what you're going to get. So, I guess you know that by now, don't you? Let's see. That covers the exams. And by the way, like I said, all the dates are in the syllabus. In fact, the quiz dates are in here like 2 or 3 times. The exam dates are in here a couple times. So make sure you know when things are going to happen, all right? For the exams and the quizzes, I'll open them up on Blackboard for a 48-hour period. So you have 48 hours to take either the quiz or the exam. Once you start the quizzes, you have to complete them. So you got a certain amount of flexibility on when you take your exams. And everything's going to be through Blackboard. You folks are all familiar with Blackboard, right? And you're all familiar with the fact it's a piece of junk too, right? Just preparing you, I've had more, every one of your professors has had more glitches with that, especially this year than, so I'm used to tests disappearing and things like that. So if you do have a problem with Blackboard, with any of the exams or the quizzes, just let me know right away, okay? And we'll try and get it fixed for you. Do you guys have any questions, concerns, anxieties? No? All righty. Keep in mind, read your syllabus, folks. Because if you tell me, I forgot the exam, well, it's in here. So, let's see, we can get a little bit done today. By the way, I get a kick out of the fact this is spring semester. Ta-da! Don't you like a little propaganda to make it sound better? It's spring out there, really. The era we're beginning with, and that a lot of you folks left off with last time, we're starting in 1876, the end of Reconstruction. It's generally known as the Gilded Age. Anybody know who gave it that name? Rather famous individual. Somebody you might have read. Sam Clemens. You know him better as Mark Twain. He called it the Gilded Age. You know why? Because on the surface, everything looked very shiny. There's a lot of progress. A lot of people are getting rich. And all that's true in this age. But underneath that is corruption, poverty, inequality, racism. That's why Twain called it the, quote, Gilded Age. It's all nice and shiny on the outside, but it's base on the inside. So, very fittingly, the era begins with a political scandal. Sort of like what we're going through today, right? You folks are living through interesting times. In 1876, it was a presidential election that year. The Democratic candidate was newspaper crusader Sam Tilden. And the Republican candidate was an Ohioan, Rutherford B. Hayes. By the way, if you wanted to win the White House back then, it actually helped to be from Ohio. We're going to have a bunch of presidents in this era that all hail from the Buckeye State. And as I want to point out, none of them are particularly any good. Sorry. We got a lot of them in there, none of them are great. You guys are going to have to change that. One of you guys is going to have to run for president, be a great president, and salvage Ohio's record. Now, the controversy in 1870. That better be the president calling to offer me a big raise.
Yeah, tell him
President of UC, Tina. Where the heck? Oh. The issue that year had to do with Reconstruction. Several southern states, Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina, were still under Reconstruction. And Oregon was a new state, and they had screwed up their election. The election had been close. Neither candidate had enough electoral votes to win. And the votes from these states were in dispute. The Republican-controlled governments in the unreconstructed states, Louisiana, South Carolina, and what was the third one I said earlier? There, I was hoping somebody was listening. Even though those states were controlled by Republican governments, the population of those states voted for Tilden, for the Democratic candidate. So you had an impasse. Those electoral votes is going to make or break somebody as president. Now, when you have a contested election under the Constitution, when no candidate gets the requisite number of electoral votes, how are they supposed to decide the election? Haven't read your Constitution lately. Some of you folks forgot about Jefferson from last semester. How did they resolve that one, do you remember? I'm kidding some of the students I had last semester for not remembering something. Oh, okay. If no candidate gets the requisite number of electoral votes in a presidential election, how is the election resolved under the Constitution?
Should it be, what do they call our votes? Huh?
Please?
Our vote.
Oh, a popular vote?
Popular vote.
No, unfortunately, that doesn't do it.
Oh,
Doesn't it go to the House and the Senate?
Very good, thank you. It goes to the House of Representatives. You get an A for the day. That's how it's supposed to be done under the Constitution. And then every state delegation votes as a whole. So all the Ohio congressmen, for example, would get together, decide which candidate they wanted, and then vote as a single entity. And right now, if that happened, the winner would have to win 2/3 of the states, the current states. That's not how they did it in 1876. They went around the Constitution. Both parties cut a secret deal behind the backs of the public. They created an electoral commission to study which candidate would be awarded the votes, the disputed votes. And they didn't do it on merit, to be honest. It was a horse trade. The Democrats wanted the end of Reconstruction in the South. the last vestiges of government control after the Civil War. And they're willing to trade that for the presidency. So even though Tilden had the majority vote, he had the popular vote, and there's been several times, including the last election we had, where the winner of the popular vote didn't win the presidency. Happened with Tilden and Hayes. So Hayes gets awarded the disputed votes, and he becomes president. And this is the election, the somewhat faulty election of 1876. These are the disputed votes assigned to Hayes, and that's what makes him president. And here's the August Rutherford B. Hayes. See, back then, to look like a president, you had to have a beard. Almost every president from Lincoln up through Teddy Roosevelt had a beard, with like one exception, one or two exceptions. So that's how you look presidential back then. Sorry, ladies. Hayes was a native Ohioan. As I pointed out, practiced law in Cincinnati for a decade, and married his wife here, Lucy. The Hayes were no fun in the White House. She was a strict teetotaler and what would not allow any alcoholic beverages in the White House, even at state dinners. Instead of serving wine, guess what she served? Lemonade. Guess what her nickname became? Lemonade Lucy. Hayes was a good guy. He was a nice guy. He was naive. He didn't realize all the corruption around him that had put him in the White House. On the night he found out that he had won the presidency, he said, "Thank God it's a miracle." And his campaign manager said, "A lot of people had a lot to do with you winning, but God wasn't one of them." So he was personally honest, but rather naive in an era of rampant corruption. And he wasn't a particularly effective president. It's kind to call him lackluster. He was somewhat of a non-entity. But he's kind of typical of the era we're talking about, the Gilded Age. After Lincoln's assassination, you pretty much have a string of lackluster or failed presidents, all the way up till maybe McKinley, but most people would say Teddy Roosevelt in 1901. There are a few exceptions to that, Grover Cleveland, but most of them are decent, honest men, but they're non-entities. They're not dynamic leaders. In fact, Congress is largely the governing entity in the country in this era. A lot of these presidents act more like figureheads. So it's an era of weak presidential leadership. There's not much ideological difference between the Democrats or the Republicans back then. Unlike today, there are stark differences. Back then, there really wasn't. Both of them were extremely pro-business and saw government largely as an extension of business. They were both more interested in winning elections than they were in reforming the system. And this was rampant at all levels of government back then, all the way down to city councils. And neither party was interested in addressing the major issues of the day. What were the major issues? If you were around in the 1870s, what do you think some of the major issues would be?
Bootleg.
Please?
Is it bootlegging yet?
Just in dry counties down south, that would
Is
be
it illegal in? Okay.
some places. Not as, that would be a much bigger problem
Racial issues?
after Prohibition, yeah. But thank you, you're thinking.
Are they just to do with judicial, the presidency?
No, there's no major controversy with the presidency. But think some of the major issues facing the nation back then. Yes, ma'am?
Civil rights for the African Americans.
That's a major issue if you're an African American. The NAACP won't even be formed for 30 years yet. It's a major issue in the South because of Reconstruction. Once Reconstruction's over, the racists take back over, and then they start imposing Jim Crow. So it's an issue, yeah, it's an issue that the nation's not facing without a doubt. Neither party is. The Democrats back then are outright racist. The Republicans are more subtle racist. What else? We're off to a start?
World War I yet?
No, not yet. The Plains Wars, but that's not that's, if you're back east, that's more romantic reading than it is actual concern at that point. Well, one that we're facing today, immigration. We've always been an immigrant nation. And there have been waves of immigration. In the 1840s, 1850s, it tended to be Germans and Irish. Who is it in the late 19th century? In the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s? Who's coming over then?
Are the Welsh one?
Yeah, they've been coming over here since the beginning, though. Yeah. Who are the new groups coming in?
Asian?
Uh,
Spanish? Or could we be bringing the African stuff?
no, not a lot of African immigration in this era.
Right. You said 19?
Not so much the Chinese have actually been excluded by this point, but this is good. You guys are thinking.
Not 19.
Probably some of your ancestry is probably represented in these groups.
Native American?
No, they were here before all of us. Yeah.
The German?
No, the Germans came, there's still German immigration, but the large numbers of Germans came in the 1840s and 1850s.
Were they Italians?
Ah, there you go, Italian. Uh-huh. It's when a lot of Italians started immigrating into America. A lot of Poles. Then you folks have Polish ancestry. This is the era your ancestor probably arrived. Central Europeans, Slovakians, for example, Czechs, Eastern European Jews, escaping the oppression of the Russian Empire, Greeks. My God, we wouldn't have Cincinnati chili if we didn't have Greek immigration. That would be a catastrophe, wouldn't it? Yeah, it got lunch in an hour and a half. But a lot of groups from Central Europe and Southern Europe for a change. And people were worried that we were going to get inundated. Italians were all criminals, didn't you know that? Poles were all stupid. How do you like stereotypes, right? And we're dealing with a lot of the same issues today, aren't we? So immigration was an issue back then. What else are they dealing with? Thank you. Rampant poverty. The size of American cities had started to literally explode in the mid-19th century, 1840s, 1850s. Millions of people are pouring in to the cities. Not only immigrants, but natural increase. A lot of native-born Americans born in the countryside or small towns. The opportunity's not in a small town back then, it's in the big city. So the cities are woefully overcrowded. The city services they provide are usually limited and stretched. Poverty is a huge issue back then. So is inequality of wealth. This is an era when you see the first, literally the first billionaires. By the end of the century, Andrew Carnegie, Rockefeller, Morgan, they will all be certified billionaires. Now, of course, today that's chump changed compared to Gates or Bezos or somebody like that. But if you prorated out Rockefeller's fortune today, he'd be worth about $250 billion. You'd be able to buy either of those guys with money left over. So you got tremendous poverty juxtaposed with tremendous wealth. And what's creating both? What's the engine of growth and the engine of destruction? Well, they're part of it, yeah. But what's the overall phenomenon that's causing this?
Industrialization.
Way to go, thank you. Very good. America's industrializing. Well, for the second time anyway. The initial industrial revolution was based on textiles. And it was in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, around 1810, 1815. We're now going through the second industrial revolution, or as it's often known, the heavy industrial revolution. This one isn't based on textiles. What's this one based on?
Engineering,
That goes into it. Yeah.
money, oil.
Technology.
All those things go in.
Capitalism.
Steel production. Yeah. You're right, technology goes into it, capitalism goes into it, you name it. The second industrial revolution is based on steel production.
That was our major output.
It's going to make us the industrial giant we are today. Because who was the great manufacturing power before we were? Dominated the world for 100 years. Thank you. Very good. Great Britain. It's in this era we begin to overtake them. In 1876, our steel production is minimal, tiny. We import most of what we use. By 1900, we're outproducing Great Britain and Germany combined. And they're the other two great steel producers. So this is an era of rapid industrialization. And you mentioned technology. It's an era of rapidly changing technology. You folks think you live in an age of technology, and you do. Of course, most of you folks have grown up now with computers and the internet and all that. See, an old fogey like me, it was something new when it came along. Back then, a lot of new inventions are revolutionizing society. What are they?
Automobile?
Yeah, they're not revolutionizing it yet, but this is when they,
The man, the airplane first.
Hmm?
Was the airplane first?
no, car was first.
That was first.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, this is the era of the birth of the automobile. And by the way, who basically invents it? Nah.
Dan?
Yeah, two guys named Mercedes and Benz.
Thought it was Diamond. Yeah.
Oh, they played, yeah, Daimler played a big role in it too. A lot of people did. So technology is changing the nation. This newfangled automobile is one thing. What else?
Is the telephone more this way?
Way to go, thank you. Yeah, Alexander Graham Bell just invented the telephone. And back then, you didn't carry it in your pocket and have email on it and everything. This is it was either mounted, you probably seen pictures of them, right? Either mounted on a wall or you picked it up and held the thing up to your ear. Mhm. No long distance yet. But that was imagine not having a phone at all, and then all of a sudden something like that comes along. It revolutionizes society. For the first time, you can basically call somebody instantly, get a hold of them. What else is changing? Technology. That was an era of industrialization and business.
No, the military, tanks, army.
Um,
Guns, yeah.
Actually, technology is affecting naval warfare a lot back then. They're rapidly going from wooden ships to all steel ships.
And they made better guns.
Yeah, the guns are getting, unfortunately, all of it's getting better.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Hasn't affected the Army as much yet.
What, better clothes?
No, they didn't even get that. As late as the Spanish-American War, they're still wearing old Civil War uniforms. So, technology doesn't catch up with the Army for a while. Does catch up with business. The typewriter. Come on, you folks have all seen a typewriter, haven't you?
Yeah, used one.
Yeah. It's the grandfather of your keyboard. The adding machine. Where you had a calculator, you had an adding machine. And they were big and clumsy, but still, it was a miracle compared to what you had before. So technology is changing this era. As I pointed out, it's pretty much marked by political corruption. A lot of cities were ruled by bosses. They had the facade of elected government, but usually one party or the other controlled the city. In New York, for example, it was Boss Tweed, Tammany Hall. They happen to be Democrats. Who is the boss here in Cincinnati? The political boss. Boss Cox, he ruled Cincinnati. He was a Republican. So the machines came in both flavors, folks. They were corrupt, they controlled the cities, they milked profits out of them. Tammany Hall built a brand new city hall in New York. Didn't spare any expenses. Cost a whopping $5 million back then. They only used about $100,000 worth of material in it. Where'd the rest of it go? Little hint, it wasn't labor cost. The machine stayed in control through corruption, election fraud, favoritism, violence, and intimidation, but also by providing benefits. After all, they did need the votes to stay in office. The way it worked, let's say this is Cincinnati back then with Boss Cox's machine. The city back then did not have certain services for the poor or the disabled or for people out of work. So it's Thanksgiving, you're hungry, you know, who shows up at the door with a turkey and dressing and all that for you? A member of Boss Cox's team who wants to make sure you had a nice dinner. You're out of a job? Yeah, they're fine for a job. You get thrown in jail? They'll talk to the judge. What do they want in return? Your votes. And I'm glad that was plural. Back then, you could rig elections. People could vote numerous times. And despite, one of the drawbacks of modern technology, can't escape it, sorry about that. But back then, today you couldn't do that with the voting machines and all that today. Despite some of the controversy, the actual percentage of voter fraud is tiny. It's insignificant. I think in the last election, what did they catch? Out of 120 million votes, 7 people or something. Didn't tip any elections, folks. Back then, you could actually pull it off. People could vote early and often back then. And that's your payback to the machine. They come pick you up early that morning, and you go around to every precinct and vote. And by the way, they also supply lunch and beer. Who can beat that deal, right? So the machines stay in power by helping people out, people that are usually left out of society. But in return, they corrupt the system, siphon tax dollars away from worthy causes. All of this is going to lead to reform movements down the road. People are going to get sick and tired of it, and you're going to get the progressive movement and the populist movement. And here's a political boss dispensing his government jobs and contracts to his followers. And here's Cincinnati's own Boss Cox. Any of you folks familiar with Clifton? The new building that they now have the public library in? Used to be a frat house. Well, before that, it was Boss Cox's mansion.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. That's now the public library in Clifton. And before that, it was a frat house. Before that, it was reputed to be a whorehouse. And before that, it was Boss Cox's mansion.
At the same time.
At the same time. I don't know about that.
I'm just kidding.
You never know. Apparently in the 1920s, that's the rumor anyway.
I was thinking in the 90s.
Please?
I was thinking in the 90s.
Yeah, it was a frat house then.
Mm-hmm. I understand, yeah. But probably.
And by the way, here's an idea what the cities were like. Here's what's now Central Parkway in Cincinnati. Right around Mohawk. Back then, there was a canal running through it. We're up here somewhere.
Was that Claremont?
Oh, I'm thinking of UC, I'm sorry. No, we're out here somewhere. I was thinking of UC, I'm sorry. Anyway, the canal ran. They finally covered that over in the 1920s. They were going to build a subway down there, and that never got built. So now it's a bunch of old bomb shelters from the 50s and 60s. As I pointed out, industrialization is going to be the major theme economically in this era. And since it's the first day, I'll let you go a few minutes early, and we'll look at that on Wednesday. You guys have a good day. Good luck with all your other classes.